What if the truths you've relied on suddenly feel like strangers, leaving you questioning everything you know? How do you cling to meaning when it feels like slipping through your fingers? The legendary Russian novelist Fyodor Dostoevsky grappled with these profound questions in a time and place where faith and reason collided. In doing so, he didn't just create stories, he explored the hidden corners of the human soul. Dostoevsky's work resonates as much today as it did over a century ago, digging into the lies we tell ourselves to make life easier. He argued that perhaps the biggest lie of all is one that silently dictates our actions, beliefs, and sense of identity. Born in 1821, Dostoevsky was raised in a profoundly religious Russian Orthodox household immersed in strict moral teachings. His childhood was rich in faith and marked by hardship. He watched his father, a doctor serving the poorest in Moscow, battle with the injustices of a brutal society. Yet, as he grew older, Dostoevsky was confronted by a society increasingly skeptical of religious authority and moral absolutism. On the cusp of modernity, Russia was torn between the old world and the new. Dostoevsky himself underwent this inner conflict. After a short stint in the military, he became entangled in political activism. In 1849, at 28, he was arrested for participating in anti-Tsarist discussions. Sentenced to death by firing squad, he faced his mortality. Just seconds before the bullets were fired, he was granted a last-minute reprieve, a psychological ordeal he would never forget. He once wrote, "Life had seemed endless to me until that moment. I felt the fire of existence in a way I had never known." From then on, he understood the raw human will to live, and his writing became a relentless examination of human suffering, redemption, and the lies we live by. But what is this lie? Why does Dostoevsky insist that it is the most dangerous and most ingrained one of all? To understand, we must look at one of his most famous characters, Raskolnikov, in Crime and Punishment. Raskolnikov believes he is extraordinary, a man above moral constraints, able to decide what is right for himself alone. This belief leads him to commit a horrific crime, justifying it as an act of personal freedom and intellectual superiority. But as the story unfolds, we watch him spiral into guilt, paranoia, and torment. The lie he told himself that he could be free of conscience, that he could be his judge, ultimately consumes him. Dostoevsky argued that the most dangerous lie we tell ourselves is that we are free from moral accountability, that we exist as isolated individuals without the ties of conscience or the gaze of others upon us. In The Brothers Karamazov, he drives this point home when Ivan Karamazov famously proclaims, "If God does not exist, everything is permitted." It's a profound philosophical declaration, but Dostoevsky goes further. Ivan, like Raskolnikov, suffers terribly under the weight of his philosophy. For Dostoevsky, the assertion that we are self-contained and morally autonomous is a form of self-deception or rebellion against the truth of human interdependence. Consider this. Throughout Dostoevsky's works, his characters struggle between individualism and interconnectedness. From Notes from Underground to Demons, they assert their independence, believing it will liberate them. Yet it only brings isolation and despair. His characters suffer not because society is stifling their freedom, but because their freedom divorced from a shared moral framework is unbearable. So what does Dostoevsky suggest as the antidote to this lie? Is there a way to live truthfully in a world where faith and doubt collide? Through his characters, Dostoevsky points toward a radical idea: humility. He believed that true freedom comes from recognizing our place within the web of human relationships and embracing the vulnerability that comes with it. In The Brothers Karamazov, Alyosha, the youngest brother, stands in stark contrast to his tormented siblings. Alyosha accepts suffering and embraces humility, grounding himself in love and compassion. Dostoevsky doesn't present this as an easy solution. Alyosha's path is filled with pain, but it also brings genuine connection and purpose. In Dostoevsky's universe, humility is not a passive acceptance of fate. It's an active choice to embrace humanity with all its imperfections and contradictions. He viewed pride, the belief that we are self-sufficient, as the root of self-deception. Pride blinds us, making us believe that our actions don't impact others and that our moral choices are alone. But for Dostoevsky, the lie of pride was the gateway to all other lies. Yet, Dostoevsky knew this truth wasn't easy to accept. We live in a world that prizes individualism and self-reliance. However, Dostoevsky challenges us to see that true strength lies not in rejecting our connection to others, but in embracing it. He urges us to recognize that every action, thought, and choice ripples outward, binding us to the lives of those around us. This is why he often described humanity as a chain, a continuous thread that links us all in responsibility and suffering. Everyone is responsible to all men for all men and everything, says Father Zosima in The Brothers Karamazov. This line may seem exaggerated, but Dostoevsky uses it to dismantle the lie that we are separate and morally autonomous. To him, the idea that we can live solely for ourselves without consequence to others is the most dangerous fiction. In his own life, Dostoevsky faced immense suffering, poverty, illness, exile, and even the death of his beloved child. Yet he saw in these trials a chance to reach beyond himself, to understand and empathize with others. Through pain, he found a shared humanity. Dostoevsky believed that suffering could be redemptive, stripping away the illusions of pride and revealing our true selves. So, what is the biggest lie you tell yourself? In Dostoevsky's view, it's the belief that you stand apart from the world, that your actions are solely your own, and that your conscience is only for you to bear. He warns that this lie leads to a life of inner conflict and isolation. He challenges us to see that real meaning emerges only when we step beyond the boundaries of self-interest. As you reflect on Dostoevsky's philosophy, ask yourself, are you living in this lie, or are you brave enough to embrace the radical responsibility he describes? It's not an easy path. It demands humility, a willingness to see beyond the self, and a commitment to moral accountability. However, Dostoevsky's wisdom remains as relevant as ever in a world that often values individual success over collective responsibility. So perhaps the question isn't whether this lie exists in your life, but what will you do when you see it staring back at you?